Hello and welcome to Sleep and Learn English from Stories. Tonight, I invite you to relax, close your eyes, and let your mind drift away as we journey into a world of words and imagination. This channel is designed to help you improve your English comprehension and vocabulary in the most peaceful way possible, while you rest. As you listen, don't worry about catching every single word. Just let the story wash over you, allowing the language to sink in naturally. Tonight's story is a gentle and slightly mysterious tale called The Night the Wind Stopped. So, find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and let's begin. The little cottage stood on a hill overlooking the sea, and for as long as anyone could remember, it was a place of constant sound. The wind was its most faithful resident. It whistled through the eaves, rattled the window panes, and sang a constant shushing song through the tall grasses that surrounded the home. Alara, who lived in the cottage, knew the wind better than anyone. She could tell by its pitch if a storm was coming, by its sigh if the day would be fair, and by its playful howl if the sea was feeling restless. The wind was her clock, her companion, her lullaby. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and rose, something strange happened. Or rather, something didn't happen. The wind, for the first time in Alara's memory, simply stopped. It wasn't a gradual slowing down. It was abrupt, like a candle flame being snuffed out. One moment, the familiar hum was there, a comforting presence in the background of her life. The next, there was only silence. The silence was not peaceful. It was heavy and loud in its own way. Alara stood up from her chair by the window, where she'd been mending a fishing net. The stillness felt unnatural, like holding your breath for too long. She went to the door and opened it. The air was completely still. Not a single blade of grass moved. The sea below was a sheet of dark glass, its usual white-capped waves gone. Even the scent of salt, usually carried on the breeze, hung motionless in the air. She walked out into her small garden. The petals of her poppies, which normally danced and swayed, were frozen in place. It was eerie. She looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to appear, brighter and sharper than she had ever seen them without the wind to blur the air. She could hear things she'd never heard before, the distant bleating of a sheep from the next valley, the tiny scuttling of a beetle in the dirt, the sound of her own heartbeat, loud and steady in her ears. The silence made the world feel both bigger and smaller at the same time. Bigger, because sounds from far away could reach her. Smaller, because everything felt held in a single breathless moment. Alara went back inside and tried to continue her evening routine. She lit a lamp, its flame standing perfectly straight, not flickering as it usually did. She made herself a cup of chamomile tea, the steam rising in a perfect, undisturbed column. But she couldn't settle. The quiet was a void that her mind kept trying to fill. She missed the creak of the old house settling, a sound usually masked by the wind. She missed the rustle of leaves outside her window. That night, sleep did not come easily. The familiar lullaby of the wind was gone, replaced by a profound and unsettling stillness. She lay in bed, listening to the silence, her ears straining for the slightest hint of a breeze. But there was nothing. It was as if the world had forgotten how to breathe. The next morning, she woke to the same unmoving world. The sun rose, casting long, still shadows. Alara decided she couldn't just sit and wait. She needed to understand what had happened. She packed a small bag with a water skin, some bread, and an apple. She believed the wind had a source, a heart, somewhere deep in the ancient woods that bordered her land. Old tales spoke of the spirit of the air, a whimsical being that directed the breezes and gales. Perhaps the spirit was sleeping, or sad, or had simply decided to rest. She set off towards the woods, her footsteps crunching loudly on the dry path. The woods were usually a place of whispers and rustles, of leaves talking to one another. Today they were silent tombs. The leaves hung limp and heavy on the branches. Birds sat quietly on limbs, their songs absent, as if they too were confused by the quiet. Alara walked for hours, deeper into the forest than she had ever gone before. The air grew cooler, but it was a still, heavy cold, not the crisp chill of a breeze. She followed a path she could barely see, a trail that felt more like an instinct than a choice. It led her to a clearing she had never seen before. In the center of the clearing was an enormous ancient willow tree. Its branches drooped all the way to the ground, creating a curtain of leaves. But even these leaves were perfectly still. This tree felt different. It hummed with a quiet energy that she could feel in the soles of her feet. Pushing aside a curtain of willow leaves, she stepped inside the space created by its branches. There, nestled among the roots of the great tree, was a small, glowing orb of light, no bigger than her hand. It pulsed with a soft white light, but the light was faint, like a fading ember. As she watched, it flickered and dimmed even more. Alara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that this was the heart of the wind, and it was dying. She knelt beside it. It was warm to the touch, but its heat was fading. She didn't know what to do. How do you help the wind? You can't give it medicine or bandage a wound. She thought about what the wind loved. It loved to travel, to carry scents and songs, to tell stories. The wind was a storyteller. So, Alara began to speak. She spoke softly, her voice filling the silent space under the willow. She told the orb about her life in the cottage. She described the feeling of the sea spray on her face, carried by the morning breeze. She told it about the songs the tall grasses sang when the wind rushed through them. She told it about the way the wind would help her dry her laundry, making the sheets billow and dance on the line like happy ghosts. She spoke of the storms, not with fear, but with respect for their power and their wild, untamed music. She told the orb stories she had heard from her grandmother, tales of mischievous breezes that would steal hats and ancient gales that shaped mountains. She sang it the lullabies the wind had sung to her every night of her life. Her voice was the only sound in the world, a small thread of noise in an ocean of silence. As she spoke, she noticed the orb begin to glow a little brighter. Its faint pulse grew a tiny bit stronger. Encouraged, she kept going. She talked and sang for what felt like hours, pouring all her memories and love for the wind into her words. She described the scent of rain on dry earth, a scent that only the wind could deliver. She described the joy of flying a kite, of feeling the tug of the wind as it lifted her creation towards the sky. Slowly, steadily, the orb grew brighter and brighter, its light filling the space under the willow. Its pulse became strong and rhythmic, like a healthy heartbeat. Then, with a soft whoosh, the orb lifted from the roots, hovering in the air in front of her. It spun gently, and Alara felt the first stir of air on her cheeks. It was just a whisper of a breeze, but it was the most beautiful feeling in the world. A single willow leaf fluttered beside her. The orb of light swirled faster and faster, and with a rush of sound it shot upwards, straight through the canopy of the willow tree and into the sky. Immediately, the world came back to life. A great gust of wind swept through the clearing, making all the leaves on the ancient willow dance and rustle. It was a joyful, celebratory sound. Alara laughed, her hair whipping around her face. The silence was broken. The world was breathing again. She made her way back home, and the journey was completely different. The wind walked with her, whispering through the trees, pushing her gently along the path. Birds were singing again, their melodies carried on the currents of air. When she emerged from the woods and saw her cottage on the hill, the grasses were swaying, and the waves on the sea below were once again tipped with white. That evening, as she sat in her chair by the window, the wind rattled the panes and whistled through the eaves. But the sound was different now. It wasn't just background noise anymore. Alara could hear the stories she had told it, She could hear the memory of her songs in its melody. The wind was no longer just a companion, it was a friend she had helped. And every night from then on, when the wind sang its lullaby, Alara would smile. She knew that in its endless, rustling voice, it was telling her thank you. The world was full of sound and movement again, and she had learned that even the most powerful forces sometimes just need someone to listen and to remind them of who they are. Thank you for joining me for tonight's story. I hope it brought you a sense of peace and helped you on your journey to learning English. May your rest be deep and your dreams be sweet. We'll be back soon with another story. Until then, good night. Please consider subscribing for more tales to help you sleep and learn.